We know LSU will be in the market for a portal quarterback, but which portal quarterback? We're discussing that next. Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked On LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. And as always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. Thank you for helping make the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network in the world. So we know that Lane Kiffin has got to go portal hunting for a quarterback. That is not even a question. As of this very moment, LSU has one scholarship quarterback on the roster. Juwan Johnson has entered the transfer portal. We know that obviously Michael Van Buren is the one quarterback that you have right now on the roster. And Colin Hurley has taken a personal leave from the team. Garrett Nussmeier is out of eligibility. You did not sign a quarterback in the 2026 class in the December signing period. So you have one. No, and there's no guarantee that Michael Van Buren is going to be back. So you have to remake that quarterback room, and it's going to happen here in the transfer portal. Not only will you get one, you may get two in this portal cycle, and then somehow add a young player as well. I mean, you've got to get options there at quarterback, and you've got to find your starting quarterback for next year. And I don't think anyone believes that that's going to be Michael Van Buren, at least not as of right now, not with the resources that LSU has and Lane Kiffin's ability, willingness, desire to go out of the transfer portal. As a matter of fact, Lane Kiffin here on Tuesday tweeted around a little after 4 o'clock in the morning, hashtag 1226. That's January 2nd, 2026. That's when the portal opened. He tweeted that just after 4 a.m. with a picture inside of football ops and a picture of Tiger Stadium from the football operations building. You can tell the entire focus of Lane Kiffin right now, GM Billy Glasscock, they are getting their board together for when the portal goes open on January 2nd, and they start, and it is floodgates open, green light go. They are going to jam come January the 2nd, and they're going to be in the mix for a quarterback. So the question is, though, which quarterback or quarterbacks will be at the top of the list? Well, let's start with the one. So a day ago, we learned that some very high-profile quarterbacks, former 5-stars, DJ Lagway, Dylan Raiola, they've entered the transfer portal. I want to get to that in just a bit because there's some odds out right now for some of the top quarterback names in the portal and where they may land. So we'll get to that in just a second. But perhaps the most obvious and most interesting name is Trinidad Chambliss. And we all know Trinidad Chambliss' story. And this is relevant because he spoke to the media about this specifically a day ago. Trinidad Chambliss was at Division II Ferris State, and he transferred this year to Ole Miss, really to be Austin Simmons' backup. He was going to end up at Temple until Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss found him on Twitter, and then they brought him to Ole Miss as a backup. Simmons gets hurt. Chambliss plays. Simmons gets Wally pipped. Chambliss never gives up the job. He's got Ole Miss in the college football playoff. Well, now the question is, with Trinidad Chambliss applying to the NCAA for another year of eligibility, if he is granted that waiver, does he stay at Ole Miss or does he enter the transfer portal? That is something that Chambliss was asked point blank during his media availability before the college football playoff this week.
I would have to consider what the best situation is for me, what I feel most comfortable with, who I trust the most, and just get a feel for every possibility really. So there's a lot that goes into that.
Okay, that certainly does not sound like a guy that is committed to the red, white, and blue, to Johnny Reb, to Hottie Toddy, to being in Oxford at Ole Miss. Okay, and to be very clear, I completely, no matter if Trinidad Chambliss was at Ole Miss or wherever he would be, when you understand his story, it makes a lot of sense. Because of his size and skill set, he's probably not a projectable NFL prospect. So I can understand Trinidad Chambliss looking at the 2026 football season, if he's granted another year of eligibility, as his gravy train. It is his one opportunity. Now, I had a conversation with several people close to Ole Miss to try to kind of get a gauge of what they paid him for this year coming in from Ferris State. And suffice to say, it was not six figures. So you're talking about right now a guy that is the starting quarterback of a college football playoff team that led Ole Miss to the greatest season in their program's history, and the money he is paid as a starting quarterback is not even six figures. When you have quarterbacks in the SEC on the low end making seven figures. So you're talking about a guy that is woefully underpaid right now relative to his accomplishment. So if he gets another year, he's going to be looking to cash in. So yes, he should go into a bidding war. He should go into the transfer portal and say, I'm open for business. And maybe the answer is you stay at Ole Miss and play another year. Or maybe it's you come to Baton Rouge and play for Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weis. But I think what's going to be interesting is there's this assumption that if Trinidad Chambliss stays at Ole Miss, then Austin Simmons would go in the portal and maybe land at LSU with Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weis. Or if Chambliss leaves, then Simmons would be the starting quarterback at Ole Miss. So I've started to dig a little bit on this quarterback situation for LSU, both short and long term. And it sounds to me like Austin Simmons will not be a possibility at LSU. Simmons is one of those guys that was a prodigy, right? As a left-handed pitcher in high school, I had an MLB scout tell me that he would have been a projected top 3-round guy. You're talking about a top 100 pick coming out of high school. Had he decided to stick with baseball, went the football route, he reclassed, graduated early, showed up at Ole Miss when he was 16, very similar to Colin Hurley at LSU. So you're talking about a guy that's a physical prodigy. This was supposed to be his year. Well, in getting hurt and then getting Wally pipped, he's fallen down the depth chart or didn't have his opportunity this year. And my understanding is that the Austin Simmons camp, notably his father, were not very happy with Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weis for benching Simmons after the injury this year. So it does not sound like it's something that Simmons would be interested in following Lane Kiffin to Baton Rouge. So really, the most obvious answer to who will be LSU's quarterback next year would be Trinidad Chambliss if he gets the extra year of eligibility. So again, if the NCAA grants Chambliss his waiver, he goes into the transfer portal, following Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weis to Baton Rouge and making seven figures to do so, to play in the offense that he's already mastered, and probably more Ole Miss offensive skill guys, maybe Kawan Lacey, maybe Watkins, the receiver, those guys maybe also coming to Baton Rouge, that would make a lot of sense. That would be seamless. It would set him up for success. He would make money. He would be with the coaches that know his skill set. That would be the most obvious answer. Austin Simmons, I do not think, is going to be an option for LSU. Now, if Chambliss stays at Ole Miss, or if Chambliss is not granted that extra year of eligibility, what direction might LSU go after that? We'll get to that as we continue here. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. The holidays are here, and whether you're hosting family, planning the perfect gift, or just trying to keep things simple and delicious, Omaha Steaks is making it easier than ever. From effortless holiday entertaining to unforgettable gifts, Omaha Steaks delivers the world's best steak experience straight to your door. And what makes it even better? With Omaha Steaks, you always know exactly what you're gifting. USDA certified tender steaks, premium proteins, gourmet size, and decadent desserts that make anyone feel appreciated. Listen, I love how easy it is to gift. It shows up frozen, it's packaged beautifully, and it's ready to cook. Steaks that are perfectly aged, insanely tender, restaurant level at home. It has become one of my favorite last-minute gifts because it feels thoughtful without requiring any stress at all. Save big on gourmet gifts and holiday favorites with Omaha Steaks. So visit omahasteaks.com, and for an extra $35 off, use code COLLEGE at checkout. Terms apply. See site for details. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code COLLEGE. And we're brought to you by Game Time. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994, and with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Game Time app is clutch. finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, you can get alerts when great seats open, and you can buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. The seat view feature, by the way, it's a game changer. You literally see what the pitch will look like from your exact seat before you buy. And my favorite feature, the prices include fees up front. I love that. There's no last-second surprises at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets and every match, concert, or event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off at Game Time. So as we sort of look at what other quarterbacks LSU may be targeting, maybe the first name that everyone has mentioned was Sam Leavitt from Arizona State. He was a playoff quarterback a year ago in 2024. This year, 2025, had a bit of a step back and is announced he's going into the transfer portal. What I can tell you is that I haven't heard any buzz around LSU as far as being interested in Sam Leavitt. I know that there's name recognition there for a lot of fans because of the 2024 season that Arizona State had, but that's not one that I've heard yet. It's not to say he won't be, but yet as far as LSU's interest, we got to keep in mind the unknown at this point is what does Lane Kiffin and Billy Glasscock, the GM, want? And the conversations I've had with folks, and candidly, I have not yet spoken to Kiffin or Glasscock, aside from the introductory press conference when I got to ask Lane Kiffin a question about NIL. I've not had conversations, but I have had conversations with plenty of people who have met with them. And my understanding is they are putting together their evaluation. And this is the key to what they do. It is take the nameplate off. They are looking for a skill set. They know what they are looking for specifically in a skill set to fit their offense. So they're right now working on putting together their board, ranking prospects, who's available, who's in the portal, what their needs are relative to the current roster, and obviously quarterback's going to be at the top. So they're going to have their board of who their targets are. And as of now, I like we talked about, I believe Trinidad Chambliss would be at the top of that list. I do not think Austin Simmons is going to be a possibility for LSU if Chambliss does not end up in Baton Rouge. But I think the other question then would be if it's not Chambliss, and who's next? So Sam Leavitt, I have not heard yet. What was interesting is that I have seen odds now for some of the top players in the transfer portal. Some of these quarterbacks who have announced that they are intending to go in the transfer portal. So Brendan Sorsby from Cincinnati, LSU currently has the third best odds. So Texas Tech is the front runner. Miami is next. Two teams that made the college football playoff this year, both with quarterbacks that are going to be gone. And then LSU is the third best odds at 4-1. Sorsby, if you're not familiar, he's a 6'3", 235-pound junior for the Bearcats. He started his first two seasons at Indiana in 2022 and 2023, and then has played the last 2 years at Cincinnati. He threw for 2,800 yards and 18 touchdowns a year ago. Then this year, 2,800 yards, 27 touchdowns, just 5 interceptions. So you're talking about a guy that's a 3-year starter. The last two at Cincinnati, he'll be playing his 5th year of college football in 2026. And that's one where LSU has the third best odds. So one worth keeping an eye on. However, the one that I think is probably the most likely for Lane Kiffin would be DJ Lagway. Now, let's just be honest. We watched DJ Lagway throw 5 interceptions at a game in Baton Rouge this year. And for DJ Lagway, he was a 5-star, the number 1 quarterback in the country out of Texas, and came with a ton of fanfare when Billy Napier landed him in Gainesville. And because Graham Mertz was injured a year ago in 2024, Lagway had the opportunity to play, but then Lagway battled his own injuries. And, one of my hesitations on Lagway coming into this season was, statistically, he was basically the same guy as Michael Van Buren. 12 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. He was sacked 13 times, threw for just 1,900 yards, completed fewer than 60% of his passes. This was as a freshman. And then all the conversation about Lagway as a dual threat guy, that didn't really manifest. He only ran for 101 yards as a freshman and averaged 2 yards a carry. So coming into this year, there was more of an expectation of a big step up. And he played more, but he threw for 2,200 yards, 16 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, completed just 63% of his passes. As we mentioned, he had the 5 interception game against LSU, and that wasn't the only one. He had 2 interceptions in the game against Mississippi State, 3 interceptions in the loss at Kentucky. He did throw an interception in the win against Florida State. But the point is, Lagway has this great physical ability. It just hasn't manifested in 2 years in Gainesville to results on the field. And it's also worth mentioning, Lagway is huge. Getting the opportunity to see him and interview him at SEC Football Media Days this year, he's listed at 6'3", 247. I mean, he looks physically like Tim Tebow, a 6'3", 250-pound quarterback. And he's a lefty, which does complicate things a little bit, but he can absolutely spin it. So, Lagway is one that is certainly worth keeping an eye on, because as I'm told, DJ Lagway is someone that Lane Kiffin really likes. So remember, go back to kind of what we talked about there with the evaluation and how Lane Kiffin puts together his board. It's not so much about star rankings or ratings or anything like that, as I understand it. It's more looking for a skill set. And undeniably, DJ Lagway has that skill set. So, is this a guy that, that may end up at the top of LSU's list? Quite possibly. If I said Lagway's a lefty. Forgive me, he's a righty, of course. I don't know why I was saying he was a lefty. But if it's not Trinidad Chambliss, at this point, I might say DJ Lagway would be next on LSU's list after Trinidad Chambliss. So as you start to piece this together and as we learn more, I'll certainly tell you more as I learn it. But I think the big takeaways here today is Chambliss is open to leaving Ole Miss, as he said, his own words. LSU would certainly be interested, and that's probably the pairing that's going to make the most sense if Chambliss is granted the extra year. If Chambliss is not granted an extra year, stays at Ole Miss, Austin Simmons is not very likely a possibility for LSU. I've not heard much about Sam Leavitt, and I think DJ Lagway would actually be the next guy on that list. For whatever it's worth, as we talked about these odds, Dylan Raiola, LSU not listed among the suitors. Same for Kenny Minchey, LSU not listed among the suitors for Kenny Minchey either. So we will keep an eye on all this as it continues to develop and evolve throughout this offseason and throughout this portal season as we get through December toward January when the portal opens on January the 2nd. But I'll continue to reiterate this. I had one administrator tell me last week that January 2nd is going to be, quote, explosive. That's the word they use. Lane Kiffin, the self-described portal king, he and the staff, they're ready to go. LSU has a war chest ready to spend in the portal. They are going to be active. Expect a big, big boom at the start of the portal window. And we anticipate LSU right there at the start should also land a quarterback. And it might be one of the guys that we just mentioned. As we learn more, we'll share it with you here on Locked on LSU. So please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video, and let a friend know that if they love the Tigers, we got you here every single day for Locked on LSU. It's your team every day.